It's a great privilege to have a chance to share with you some thoughts that we have here in Godan on open data. I often used to say that in my lifetime, most of yours, I guess, we went through 3 consecutive technological revolutions. They didn't make so much noise, but really they are in the process of transforming the world. The first revolution was the internet, because the internet put the world together in one way, allowed us to reach any part of the planet in a fairly easy and instant manner. The second revolution was the intelligent phones, because they brought the internet to your fingertips. But the third revolution, the one that is really making a big difference now, is data, because it's one thing to be able to connect, but then the substance, the knowledge, the sharing of the knowledge is the whole idea. And that's how we were born. Godan is a young creature. We're 2 years old, actually, almost to the day. And we were created based on this concept that because of climate change, because of demographics, as we know, the world will include 50% more people before 2050. So we have to adapt to that and find ways to make sure that we can feed everybody and we can help everybody have a better quality of life overall. So, and the way to do that, we feel, is through innovation. And innovation, especially in the regions of the world that will be most effective, that is Asia and Africa. That's where demographics will expand the most. But yet, that's where they have the largest untapped agricultural potential. That's where data and open data comes up in agriculture and nutrition. That's where we are. So we work on a number of different angles, which I will quickly go through. We're now a global organization. We're 2 years old, but yet we have almost 600 partners or associations of partners. In reality, it's more, from anywhere from Argentina to Australia, so and from genomes to satellites. So we look at the whole value chain in our partnership, and that's what makes it exciting, because we get people from very different sectors to work together and find that they have common ideas, common problems, and that by working together, they do many more things. So, on this note, some people say, okay, open data, what's this open data business all about? Well, there are different ways to look at it, but the key characteristics is data that anyone can access, can use, and can share. So it's data that's readily available, something that's meaningful, also that's useful. The tendency until some years ago, when this concept of open data came, was just to open floodgates and release all data that was available, but sometimes created more confusion than other things, mostly because it came in a variety of different formats and not necessarily aiming at a specific clientele or specific needs. And finally, open data should be interpretable. That means it can move around and be used for different purposes. Sorry about that. I'll just go the other way. Then Godan, I explained why we came about, because of the tripling of the world population within less than a century, leading to the fact that we have to produce this century alone, even before 2050, we have to increase global food production by 60%. So that's quite a lot, knowing that we already have 85% of the fish stocks already fully exploited or overexploited, and many parts of the world, up to 90% of fresh water available is already used up by agriculture. So increasing production by another 60% is quite a challenge. And then climate change, of course, is interfering with this, because as we're trying to produce more, climate change alone is making it difficult to maintain production levels as they are today. Land degradation is one of the phenomenon. Global warming also makes agriculture more difficult, change in rain patterns, and so on. What helps, though, is technology. Technology costs are drastically down. Data is available in a way that was never conceived before, and in fact, in some ways, it's almost too much. There's so much data that part of the challenge we're dealing with, and many other partners, is to find ways to help the common users, be it the individual, the consumer, the wholesale producer, the governments, the private sector, to navigate their way in this ocean of data that's out there. I forgot to mention is DG2 because, of course, since we're focusing a lot on making sure the world is fully and well nourished, we're very much linked to a number of SDGs, in particular SDG2, which is at the heart of what we do. But we're also linked to other SDGs, especially in relation to water partnership and others. This is just a global map as to where GODAN was a couple of months ago, I guess. Now we have more, but it just shows that we're pretty well all over the place. And we have a number of partners in Germany, including BMLE, which is, of course, one of our key and main partners, which kindly agreed, in fact, to second an expert to us focusing on data rights, which is one of the angles that is being discussed in the GODAN partnership. I was saying earlier that there's a mass of data available out there. One of the themes we're really pushing for is data integration, because we have data coming from all kinds of different sources. So by integrating these different sources, being able to tap to data that may pertain to the same thing, the same location, but from different sources, we allow cross-checking and we allow for a rapid increase in the quality of the data, but also we allow for greater capacity to predict. Now, there's a huge volume of information out there, so one of the many challenges is for us to find ways to navigate through that. Because, and that's where I was, because one of the advantages is that now using data properly, especially integrating it from different sources, we improve the quality, and doing that in a historical manner, then we can increase greatly our capacity to predict what's likely to happen, whether it is in terms of droughts, floods, or other weather-related events in particular. But we can also better predict how our crops will be doing, for example, which is very important because it has impact on trade, infrastructure, and so many other issues. Some of the things that we see happening around the world, some people are making extensive use of this technology and providing services. This one that I'm going to show you is from the private sector, but we work with equally, almost, I would say, with governments and government entities, research organizations and the like, private sector and civil society, because this is the triangle that Mr. Wolfenson, the former president of the World Bank, described as a democratic form of collective development, whereby the citizens express needs, governments release data that they have that can help achieve that, and private sector makes use of the data to transform it in applications of different kinds. This is one of them. This is one of our partners. It's Climate Corporation. It's a US-based company. What you see in there is the inside of a tractor. So in my time, tractors look very different, but that's, if you push now technology to the max, that's what it does. What you see on the left in this kind of iPad that they have inside the tractor is used for geodata, for pre-positioning, precision irrigation and precision agriculture, irrigation and fertilizing in particular, hence reducing the cost. But it also does something amazing, is that it allows the farmer to make simulations, to say, okay, if I use this fertilizer instead of that one, or this type of seeds instead of that one, what is the likely impact? And it tells him or her. So it's quite an achievement, and that was not possible just a very few years ago. But of course, that's high tech, which is sometimes beyond the reach of many. So, but yet, geodata, open data, can be simplified and made available to the common farmer, to the regular guy, without having to go through all the technical complications. That's an example from South Africa, where we have this project. Now it's a small cooperative. The initial project was to reduce water consumption in the region that you see colored now. This is using geodata. Geodata now allows satellite imagery in a very accurate way, which allows not just to know where it's raining, but to also assess the quality of the soil that you're looking at. So the objective of this project was to reduce water consumption by 10% over 3 years. What they managed to achieve was a reduction of 10%, but a tripling of the irrigated surface at the same time. So it was quite an exponential gain. But other applications that they can do is that the different colors don't just reflect the level of moisture in the soil, but also the quality of the biomass. So it gives you an idea as to where you should fertilize and where you don't need to, etc. So this is information that's a bit complicated to generate, but thanks to intermediaries is made available in a very easy to understand way to farmers, in this case in South Africa, but it's in many places in the world. Then there's even simpler. This one is based on what you probably have at your house. I have one that tells me when it's time to water the plants in the pots. So that's basically what it does. It's a small gadget that is available in many countries, and especially in Africa, in Chad, in Niger, and others. And what it does three things. The stick does the same as it would in your flower pot at home, but it also captures free, open weather data. And then it transmits the compilation of the two to a mobile phone. So the farmer can know from his or her farm, from wherever he is, which part of the land is dry or about to be dry to what percentage, and whether he or she needs to irrigate or not, having in mind the weather forecast that is also arriving at the same time. So it may say, well, this part is a bit dry, but since it's going to rain tonight, you don't need to irrigate. So this is the type of thing that in places where water is very scarce is very important. And it's very cheap, and it's solar powered, so they don't need batteries, and there's no maintenance required. This is another one that's from Bayer, German-based company. They developed a number of applications using open data and artificial intelligence. The one you have on the left is detects weeds. So what the farmer does, you just go around, you see a type of weed invading your field, you take a picture of it, it goes instantly to the central unit, which through artificial intelligence identifies the weed and sends back information as to what to do about it. On the right is the same principle, but it's for beetles and bugs. The advantage is not only fast service or fast answer to the farmers, but it also allows to detect infestations, because if 50 people have suddenly reported a certain type of bug, it may mean that the region is infested. I see a comment on the cost of this equipment. The cost of the one I showed you before is around $60. So per unit, that's the cost, and they're trying to reduce it some more. Some cooperatives, in fact, are trying to find a way to lease or to lend or to rent the equipment to the farmers, which then reduces the cost quite drastically. So cost is a driving factor in research and finding ways. Now, these applications that I'm just showing now, they're free, so anybody can download them. But then, of course, if the conclusion is that you need to buy some weed killer or some pest repellent, then of course you'll have to pay for that, but the actual information is free. So that's a good example of use of open data by the private sector. Quality challenges, quality of the data and resolution and localization of data. Well, quality of data is often raised in terms of whenever we talk about open data, but what experience shows is that the more open the data is, the better the quality. I often quote Wikipedia as an example of this. The first version of Wikipedia that came out, some may remember, had a lot of mistakes in it because it was pulled out very quickly, and but over time, people corrected it, because whatever was wrong, somebody saw it and said, hey, this is a mistake. Instead of saying this, it should say that. So over a very short period of time, the quality improved quite a bit. So this is why one of the reasons why we're promoting open data, because the more open it is, the better is the quality. The same is true also for research, by the way. So which is, I guess it's a natural reflex. People tend to be very possessive of their data, and the fear of being exposed if you have a mistake in your research or in the data you're releasing. While in reality, what you're doing is that you're triggering a dialogue that ends up improving the quality of your data and the partnership that you're then establishing with a broader range of people or entities.
Sorry for the interruption, Andre. Maybe we can make a very short break, as I can see there are already a lot of questions that just go back to what you said. I will just ask you the first question. You talked a lot about the availability of open data, and Johannes from Namibia asked, for how many and which country is this kind of open data available? Is it also available for Uganda, Ghana, Nigeria and Burkina Faso?
Yes, it is. In fact, but of course, there's a ton of open data available. So the availability or the nature of the open data varies from one place to the other. But there's data that's available, like satellite data now, is available anywhere in the world, and from different sources, be it NASA or the European Space Agency in particular, being the two main ones. But now you also have Chinese data and other sources that make it available at a very fine level of definition, in fact, worldwide, including, of course, in Uganda, Ghana, and other countries that you mentioned. But I would like to add one thing, and Ghana makes me think about that, is that open data is oftentimes, and that's very nice, it is a two-way street. In Ghana, there's a very good example. One of our partners is called ESOKO, E-S-O-K-O. So if you have a chance, go to YouTube. They have a very nice little website, a little skit or a little something that explains what they do. But basically, they share weather data with their members, but also agricultural information and market information, which tends to be extremely useful to the members. So what they do is they don't just capture the open data, they generate some themselves through the different people they have in various markets that call them every day, and so that they can rebroadcast that market information daily to their members. Okay. So it's a two-way kind of relationship.
Okay. Cool. Then there was another question that goes into the direction what kind of agriculture projects you are working with in GIZ already, but I think we will hold that question back and you just start now to talk about the best practice cases. Okay, just continue. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, my next slide I was going to illustrate. You see, I started with real high-tech stuff like this tractor, which is like a control center almost because it's so technologically advanced. And beyond, not the capacity, but I would say the needs of many countries, especially countries where the farm size is very small. So that's not really for them. They need something more adapted. So I won't go through the different types of equipment that are being developed for small farm holders, but there's different technologies that become more and more simple, and that's the spirit of the various slides that I just showed you. And with this final one here, or in terms of this point I'm making, which is that not everybody has a computer, not everybody speaks English, but yet they all have a need for data. This is one of the good examples, I think, of a simple way to make data meaningful to regular people. This is a hotline they've established in Ethiopia a couple of years ago. So when a farmer has a pest infestation or some other problem, his maize is dying or there's a problem and doesn't know what to do with, they call the hotline. In the first 3 months of setting up that hotline, they got 500,000 calls. So that shows there's a very high demand for data. And at any point in time in Ethiopia, they have on average around 1 million users of this hotline system, which again doesn't use a computer per se, having in mind that these guys probably don't have one, maybe don't speak English. But their intermediary translates the data for them in the local language and explains them in layman's term what it means to them. Now, at the policy level, I was saying at the beginning of the conversation, we work at many different levels. So all the way down to the farmer, like the one I showed you before, but coming back up to governments. This is a picture that was taken during a summit held in June in Nairobi, Kenya, where we had 15 African ministers of agriculture or environment, depending the country, that agreed on establishing an open data policy and mechanisms in agriculture and nutrition in their respective countries. And 1 year from now, at the ministerial level, again, to report on the progress made or lack of 1 year down the road. So it's the highest level. It's to put in place the environment that will allow open data to flow, to be generated, made available to everyone. We work with governments and others in many different ways. This one just disappeared. That's another tool that we're making available to governments in particular. Many of them, they say, okay, this is all nice. We'd like to implement open data in our country, but we don't really know where to start. So what do we do? So we're developing tools to make available to them. And this is one of them. It's the Ag package. So it's designed for governments to help them categorize, define their needs, categorize the data they have, and prioritize which one they should release first, and then how to proceed. So it's giving them tips as to how to do that. And as you can see, we made it available in French, and now I believe it's available in Spanish as well. Then, I'm not sure what's happening with this slide over here.
No, that's fine. It's actually the last slide. Thank you very much. It's perfect because now we still have a lot of time for questions, and it seems like there are a number of questions. Let's just start now again. So one question was, is there any experience that you have already with cooperating with GIZ in specifically agriculture and nutrition related projects?
We have a number of instances of collaboration with GIZ, either directly or through intermediaries that also, or through partners that also work with GIZ in various countries. One of the recent examples has to do with SDG2 and SDG2 monitoring. GIZ developed a very nice SDG implementation monitoring tool that we became associated with, and that now we're expanding to other parts of the network, including EASA and others, which are trying to work with countries, trying to help them achieve the SDGs, and in our case, especially SDG2.
Okay, thank you.
Just one among many examples.
Okay, thank you. Then there was another question. Among the many other challenges, there are two challenges regarding open data. The first one is the quality of the data and the resolution and localization of the data so that we can use them. And so the question is, how can we address these two issues? So the quality and the resolution and the localization of the data so that we can actually have them for our work available.
Well, the quality, as I said, one of the, there are two keys to that, I think. There's more, but two important ones are, one, to make data as open as possible so that it can be cross-referenced, checked, commented, strengthened by as many entities as possible. As for the localization, as I said, there's already the open data that's available worldwide, ranging from geodata to weather to agricultural information and the like. But the problem is to access it. So oftentimes the regular people, they don't know where it is. They don't know where to find it. They don't have the means to access it. So one of the things we're doing in GODAN is that we're now starting a series of regional trainings in terms of data extraction and data integration. We're going to start one in East Africa, followed by another one in Asia, and then other parts of the world, because that's really where most of the problem is. And one of the short-term solutions resides largely in the private sector. Governments are doing lots of nice initiatives too, but private sector is very active at finding ways to develop, to transform open data into applications that make sense to the users, like I just showed you in the Bayer example with the infestations.
Okay, cool, thank you. Then there's another question. Is there any good, interesting example for using open data in the nutrition sector particularly?
Oh, for sure. There are many. In fact, we just had a summit in Cambridge, which is Cambridge, UK, which is another of our partner. We had a Global Nutrition Summit also in June, where this issue was very much discussed. There are many. When you think of nutrition, you tend to think of what people eat, which is an important element, and there are many good initiatives ranging from working with governments in disclosing and enforcing through their laws the disclosing of key nutritional information like salt content, fat content, content of basically what you buy, limiting the content of things that are not so good for your health, like salt, for example, limiting advertising, like many countries now forbid advertising targeting children with sweets, especially candies and sugary things at peak hours on television when children are watching. But then nutrition goes way beyond that, and there's of course a lot of efforts trying to put in place, develop, and make available nutrition-related database, whether it is in terms of food production, food content, as well as various different impacts on the human body of different food nutrition components. But nutrition goes even beyond that. It goes to infrastructure, because it's one thing to produce enough food, let's say, for the world, but if it's produced in the wrong place, you could have excess of food somewhere and shortage somewhere else. So transport is very important. Storage is also important. A lot of nutritious food is wasted every year. About 30% of all food produced never reach the consumer, worldwide that is. And a lot of it has to do with storage, with transport also, but also with storage. I'm thinking of goods like fish and milk, for example, which are very vulnerable to this. So you see, there's many different angles to the question, and open data is very much used in all of the areas that I mentioned to you.
Thank you for answering this question. And then there is another question. We talked about that already. I asked you that question and I'm very happy that this question now popped up. The question is, are there already examples where public sector ministries themselves feed into open data platforms? Because you mentioned already Kenya, so maybe you can say a word about that.
Oh, for sure. Of course, not all countries are equally advanced. Some are pretty advanced about that. I would say European countries have paved the way quite some time ago, but then followed by other economically advantaged countries. But gradually, the benefits of open data for governments themselves become so obvious that more and more governments are following suit. And one of the first things we encourage them to do is to make the data they own available. The basic reasoning is that data that governments generate is paid for by taxpayers, so therefore it's the property of their citizens, so it's their right to have it back in some way. But beyond that, releasing open data in a way that's satisfactory can only help to the well-being of the population, so in turn that also helps the government. So Kenya is an example. There are many other countries around the world that are, and more countries, the majority now, I would say, have portals of one kind or another where they make data available. Sometimes not all data. Some are just starting. Some are more advanced. But we're very happy with that. While in some other parts of the world, like in Europe, they're quite advanced in terms of regulating that, making sure that by law the data the government releases is free of charge. And in some countries, like in France, I'm thinking they're making it a human right, basically, for people to access data and have a continuing access to data, especially for vulnerable populations.
Okay, thanks. I will just add another question that was many times asked to me and also in preparation of this webinar. It's a question, how can we guarantee data protection? How can we protect our farmers' data while we work with open data? Maybe you can say a few words about that as well.
For sure, and it's another example of good collaboration with Germany because the BLE is seconding us, as I think I mentioned earlier, an expert on data rights. There's a few angles to that. One has to do with privacy. We're working on an ethics code so that when people release the data, they release it in a way that's as anonymous as possible and that protects individual private life. There's also the commercial aspect of it. Private sector is invited to release data, and more do, like in the Bayer example I gave you earlier. But yet at the same time, they have, if it's data that arises from investments they made in research, they want to protect their investment at least until they've recouped their investment. Otherwise, there won't be any more research. So there's a line that we're drawing, discussing with entities such as Rabobank, for example. Even banks are involved in the dialogue, because they acknowledge that it's better for the economy that data is as open as possible, but sometimes in a progressive manner depending on the sectors, and always protecting individual privacy.
Okay, I have one last question. In the beginning, Pedro asked the question, what about the cost for this equipment? You showed on slide 8. I think I just quickly go back. You showed some equipment like this. You said that farmers can use different kinds of equipment to improve their agriculture, but I mean this equipment is with data that comes from that equipment is probably not very cheap. So maybe you can say something about that as well.
That's true. The cost of the equipment varies depending on the type, of course, and the formula that is used. As I said, more and more they go through cooperatives and others to spread the cost of equipment. The use of drones, for example, is a good example of that, where it's not really cost effective for a farmer unless you have a huge farm to have your own drones. But if you can share, it may take only 10 seconds for a drone to overfly your farm. So if you only pay for 10 seconds of the drone's time, it would be minimal. So a lot of data is free, and more of the data goes through mobile phones, equipment that people already have. So you don't need a computer, like in the example of the apps I shared with you earlier, or through the hotline that I shared from Ethiopia. That's also, it doesn't require any additional equipment, and yet it allows you to benefit from data that's fully available, and that's very beneficial to you. So the cost goes from zero to sky is the limit, depending what you want to invest. But in general, open data by principle is free. So
okay, thanks. Yeah, I mean that's the positive part about it, right? I give us two, because we had some technical issues, so normally we should finish now, but I give us 2 more minutes. I think there's one more question coming now. Navin, if you don't mind, we will email you the answer. That's part of the plan for now. And if you're interested to learn more about our activities in the field of ICT for agriculture, I invite you to drop me an email. I will include you in our community of practice. And also at the 18th of October, we have another webinar, very interesting, and it's called Digital or Analog, How You Can Leverage the Power of Mobile Phones for Sustainable and Measurable Impacts in Your Agriculture Project. So we are pretty much looking forward for the next webinar. And yes, to answer your question, for sure we will now just give us a few more minutes, share the PowerPoint, and also Andre's email address. So you're much welcome to drop an email to Andre, discuss with him, and yeah, just share information. That's what Godan is doing. Okay, thank you very much.
That's right, and I invite everybody, if you have some time, to go to our website. It's godan.info. You're going to see a lot of examples, some short videos, and all kinds of interesting stuff related to open data. And all of our publications are downloadable as well, so for free.
Okay, great. And I will just now, if you just hold on for a second, I will add the presentation from Andre, and you can watch it actually. Okay, thank you very much, everybody, and have a nice evening.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Julia.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.